Darkness, silence, and then those ominous footsteps approaching from the distance. On a cold autumn night in 1968, in one of America's small towns, the story that began wasn't just a horror film. It was a mirror reflecting society's deepest fears, prejudices, and helplessness. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead didn't just show us The Walking Dead that night, when it forever changed cinema history. It showed us ourselves. This journey, beginning in the desolate countryside of Pennsylvania, tells the survival struggle of seven strangers while actually exposing America's social wounds in 1968. Shot in the shadow of the Vietnam War, at the height of the civil rights movement, this film would take the horror genre to an entirely different dimension. But did it really matter who survived that night? Or were we all already dead? Main character introduction. Ben Turner, a strong, determined, and brave African-American man in his 30s, an unconventional hero for that time. Because in 1968, there were virtually no films where a black man led white characters. In Ben's eyes, there was both fear and responsibility. His past remained unclear, but his behavior suggested military training. Every movement was planned, every decision logical, but storms raged within him. The decisions he made to survive increasingly isolated him. You know, if you were in Ben's shoes, facing not just the undead but the living, who questioned your every move, what choice would you have made? Would you have fought to lead, knowing that your skin color made you a target even before the dead started walking? Ben carried the weight of representation on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to be weak, couldn't afford to fail, because he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting against every stereotype, every prejudice that said he didn't belong in that leadership role. Barbara, a young woman, fragile in appearance, but harboring unexpected strength within. At the film's beginning, she's in shock, almost catatonic. While trying to cope with losing her brother Johnny, she found herself in the middle of surrounding chaos. With her blonde hair, pale complexion, and constantly widened eyes, she was fear incarnate. Yet beneath that terror, something else stirred, a will to survive that even she didn't know existed. Harry Cooper, a middle-aged, selfish, and authoritarian family man, preferring to hide in the cellar with his wife Helen and sick daughter Karen. Harry was in constant conflict with Ben. For him, survival was acceptable, even if it meant sacrificing others. Harry represented everything wrong with the old guard, stubborn, racist, and convinced that his way was the only way. His refusal to cooperate, his need to maintain control, even as the world crumbled around him, made him perhaps more dangerous than the creatures outside. Helen Cooper carried the burden of a failing marriage even before the dead rose. Educated, thoughtful, she saw through her husband's cowardice, but felt trapped by the conventions of her time. Their daughter Karen, just 11 years old, lay fevering in the cellar, a bite mark hidden beneath her clothes, a ticking time bomb that would soon explode in the most horrific way imaginable. Tom and Judy, the young couple, represented hope and innocence. Still believing in a future together, they clung to each other as the world fell apart. Their love seemed pure in the face of such horror, but purity had no place in this new world order. The story's beginning. As the sun prepared to set, Barbara and her brother Johnny drove through the Pennsylvania countryside to visit their mother's grave in a remote cemetery. The radio played softly, news reports of strange incidents that neither paid attention to. Johnny, ever the joker, couldn't resist teasing his sister with a childhood game. "They're coming to get you, Barbara. They're coming for you." His voice carried that mocking tone. Brothers perfect over years of sibling rivalry. But this time, the joke became reality. A strange man appeared in the cemetery, stumbling with an odd, lurching gait. At first, they assumed he was drunk, perhaps a vagrant who'd wandered in. But when the man grabbed Barbara with inhuman strength, Johnny rushed to protect her. The struggle was brief and brutal. Johnny's head struck a gravestone with a sickening crack, and he crumpled to the ground, motionless. Barbara, paralyzed with shock for a moment, then ran to the car, but the keys remained with Johnny. The strange man pounded on the window, his dead eyes showing no emotion, no humanity. The glass cracked, then shattered. Barbara burst from the car and ran across the empty fields, her dress catching on bushes, her shoes slipping in the mud. Behind her, that relentless pursuer, never tired, never stopped. Breathless, soaked in sweat and tears, she finally reached an old farmhouse. The door was unlocked. A miracle. She barricaded herself inside, but safety was an illusion. The house felt alive with shadows and secrets. The phone was dead, its silence more terrifying than any scream. Upstairs, she discovered a half-devoured corpse, its face frozen in an eternal scream of agony. Just then, headlights cut through the gathering darkness. Ben Turner arrived. With a tire iron in hand, he entered the house with determined steps. His first words to Barbara were calm but urgent. "Don't you know what's going on out there? The radio's been telling people to stay inside, lock their doors. The dead, they're coming back." Ben immediately took charge, his military training evident in every efficient movement. He began boarding up windows and doors with dismantled furniture, creating a fortress from a farmhouse. Barbara remained in shock, unable to speak, her mind replaying Johnny's death over and over. Ben tried to comfort her while securing their defenses, but comfort was a luxury they couldn't afford. Then, from below, voices emerged from the cellar. Harry Cooper appeared first, his face twisted with indignation. "You could have let those things in," he accused. Behind him came Helen, their sick daughter Karen, and the young couple Tom and Judy. They'd been hiding since the morning, listening to the horror unfold above them. The conflict was immediate. Harry insisted the cellar was safer. One door, easy to defend. Ben argued for staying upstairs. Multiple exits, ability to see threats approaching. But beneath the tactical disagreement lay something deeper. Harry couldn't accept taking orders from a black man. His barely concealed racism poisoned every interaction, even as the dead gathered outside. The house became a pressure cooker of human tensions, while outside, the undead assembled. They moved slowly, clumsily, but with terrible purpose. In the moonlight, their faces showed various stages of decay, some fresh, others ancient. They pressed against the boarded windows, their fingers searching for any weakness. The sound of their moaning created a horrible chorus that never stopped. Climax. As night deepened, the situation grew desperate. The television flickered to life with emergency broadcasts. The reports from Washington were apocalyptic. The dead were rising everywhere, consuming human flesh. Scientists speculated about mysterious radiation from a recent Venus probe, but nobody knew for certain. The only solution: destroy the brain or burn the body completely. The news showed grainy footage of militia groups organizing, shooting the creatures with disturbing efficiency, but it also showed the breakdown of society. Hospitals overrun, police stations abandoned, families torn apart. One reporter, broadcasting from a barricaded studio, suddenly screamed as shapes appeared behind him. The transmission cut to static. Ben formulated a desperate plan. They needed the truck outside, and it needed fuel. With Tom and Judy, he would reach the gas pump near the barn. If successful, they could escape to one of the rescue stations the television mentioned. Harry refused to help, retreating to his cellar and barring the door, declaring he wouldn't open it for anyone. The plan unraveled catastrophically. Ben cleared a path through the undead, using a torch made from a table leg, the flames keeping the creatures at bay. Tom reached the truck, but the gas pump's lock wouldn't break. In his panic, he spilled gasoline on the torch Ben had left nearby. The truck erupted in flames with Tom inside. Judy, rather than saving herself, ran to help him. She reached the truck door just as the gas tank exploded. The blast illuminated the night sky, drawing more undead from miles around. Ben barely made it back, fighting through dozens of grasping hands. He pounded on the cellar door, but Harry refused to open it. "You made your choice," Harry shouted through the door. Ben had to fight alone, using the rifle sparingly. Bullets were running low. Each shot had to count. The undead pressed against the weakening barricades, their combined weight threatening to break through. Meanwhile, in the cellar, another tragedy unfolded. Karen's fever had broken, but something else had taken its place. Helen discovered her daughter crouched over something, making wet, tearing sounds. When Karen turned, her mouth was covered in blood. She'd been gnawing on her own arm. The bite from that morning had done its work. Helen's scream brought Harry running, but it was too late. Karen attacked her mother with a cement trowel, stabbing repeatedly with inhuman strength. The scene was brutal beyond imagination, a child destroying the one who gave her life. Harry fled upstairs, where his confrontation with Ben reached its deadly conclusion. They fought over the rifle, two men representing different worlds, different philosophies, now reduced to primitive survival instinct. Ben shot Harry, who stumbled back to the cellar, to die beside his transformed family. His last vision was Karen, covered in her mother's blood, reaching for him with those small, deadly hands. Barbara finally emerged from her catatonic state, stirred by the chaos around her. She began to help Ben, showing unexpected courage. But then, through the partially broken window, she saw him, Johnny. Her brother stood among the undead, his head tilted at an unnatural angle from his broken neck, his suit still bearing their mother's flowers. When their eyes met, something flickered in Barbara's mind. "Johnny," she cried, reaching toward him. The undead burst through the weakened defenses. Johnny's dead hands reached for his sister, and whether Barbara embraced him or tried to flee, became lost in the chaos. The creatures dragged her into the night, her screams echoing across the dark countryside, until they suddenly stopped. Ben watched helplessly as the last person he'd tried to protect disappeared into that writhing mass of death. Resolution. Ben stood alone in the house, the sole survivor of a night that seemed to last forever. He continued fighting, using furniture as clubs when the ammunition ran out. His hands bled from splinters, his body ached from countless struggles, but he persevered. As dawn broke, painting the sky a pale pink, the sound of gunfire approached from the distance. The local militia had organized, moving systematically through the countryside. They worked with cold efficiency, shooting the undead and burning the bodies. Their leader, Sheriff McCloud, directed operations like a general commanding troops. "Beat 'em or burn 'em. They go up pretty easy," he instructed his men, treating the apocalypse like a particularly challenging hunting season. Ben heard them outside, the blessed sound of human voices, of rescue. He'd survived the unsurvivable night. Moving carefully to the window, he peered out to see uniformed men, armed and organized. Relief flooded through him. He'd made it. All those deaths hadn't been in vain. He'd proven that with intelligence, courage, and determination, humanity could prevail. He moved toward the front door, ready to identify himself to his rescuers. But as he appeared in the window, one of the militiamen pointed. "There's another one." The sheriff barely glanced up. "All right, Vince." Hit him in the head, right between the eyes. The shot rang out, precise and fatal. Ben crumpled to the floor, his survival story ending with bitter irony. The militiamen entered the house with hooks, dragging Ben's body out like all the others. "That's another one for the fire," someone said casually. The final images showed Ben's body thrown onto a pyre with the undead he'd fought all night to avoid becoming. The smoke rose into the morning sky, carrying away the last evidence of his heroism. Film quotes and scene descriptions. The film's most haunting imagery came not from gore, but from composition. Romero shot in stark black and white, using shadows and light to create a nightmare atmosphere. The undead appeared first as distant figures, barely visible in the twilight. As night fell, they became more defined, more horrible. Close-ups revealed clouded eyes, slack jaws, and reaching hands that seemed to emerge from the screen itself. One unforgettable scene showed the undead feasting on Tom and Judy's charred remains. They pulled apart the bodies with their bare hands, fighting over pieces like animals. The camera didn't flinch, forcing audiences to confront the complete breakdown of human dignity. This wasn't the sanitized horror of earlier films. This was raw, primal, and disturbingly realistic. The cellar scenes created claustrophobic terror. When Karen killed Helen, the camera focused on shadows on the wall, the raised trowel, the striking motion repeated again and again. The violence was both shown and hidden, making it somehow worse. Our imagination filled in what shadows concealed. Ben's final stand was filmed in long, exhausting takes. We felt his fatigue, his desperation. When he used a table leg as a club, the camera stayed close, showing sweat dripping from his face, his labored breathing. This wasn't an action hero. This was a man pushed beyond human limits. The morning militia scenes contrasted sharply with the night's chaos. These men moved casually, almost cheerfully through the carnage. They posed for photos with dead bodies, made jokes about their hunting success. The real horror wasn't the undead anymore. It was the living's casual acceptance of violence, their transformation into something perhaps worse than the monsters they fought. Personal reflection and connection. You know, watching this film today, in our modern world, I can't help but see the parallels to our own societal fears. The undead in Romero's vision weren't just monsters, they were us, stripped of everything that makes us human, except hunger. And the living? They showed that civilization is just a thin veneer, ready to crack under pressure. What strikes me most powerfully is Ben's tragedy. Here was a competent, intelligent leader who made mostly right decisions, who kept his humanity even as others lost theirs. Yet he died not from the undead, but from the prejudice and carelessness of his supposed rescuers. Romero, whether intentionally or not, created a perfect metaphor for the African American experience in 1968, fighting to survive not just external threats, but the prejudices of those who should be allies. For me, this film resonates because it asks the fundamental question: what separates us from monsters? Is it our capacity for reason? Ben had that, yet it didn't save him. Is it our ability to work together? The survivors' cooperation broke down almost immediately. Is it our humanity, our compassion? Barbara showed both, yet she was consumed by the chaos. The film suggests something darker, that maybe there is no clear line between human and monster, between civilization and chaos. We're all just one crisis away from becoming the very things we fear. That farmhouse wasn't just a shelter. It was a microcosm of society under pressure, revealing the fractures that were always there. Closing, interactive. Think about this for a moment. If you were trapped in that farmhouse, who would you have sided with? Ben's logical but risky plans for escape, or Harry's defensive bunker mentality? Would you have tried to maintain humanity like Helen, or would survival at any cost become your only goal? What truly haunts me about this film is how relevant it remains. Replace the undead with any modern crisis: a pandemic, social unrest, environmental disaster, and the human dynamics remain identical. We still divide ourselves, still let prejudice guide our decisions, still turn on each other when we should unite. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think Romero was really trying to tell us? Was the ending Ben's death inevitable? Or could different choices have saved him? And perhaps most importantly, in our current world, have we learned anything from the warnings this film provided over 50 years ago? If this journey through one of horror's most important films touched something in you, please share your thoughts below. What classic film should we explore next? What memories do you have of first watching this masterpiece? And remember, classic films aren't just entertainment, they're mirrors reflecting our deepest truths, even when those truths are uncomfortable. Analysis and examination. Night of the Living Dead didn't just revolutionize horror cinema, it demolished and rebuilt it entirely. Before Romero, zombies were products of voodoo curses, controlled by masters. Romero created the modern zombie, mindless, hungry, and unstoppable in numbers. This concept would influence everything from The Walking Dead to World War Z, establishing rules that still govern zombie fiction today. The film's production itself was revolutionary, made for just $114,000, using chocolate syrup for blood and mortician's wax for wounds. It proved that vision mattered more than budget. Romero used actual human organs from a butcher shop for the feeding scenes, creating visceral horror that expensive effects couldn't match. The cast, mostly local theater actors, brought authenticity through their inexperience. Their fear felt real because in many ways it was. But let's examine the deeper cultural impact. Released in 1968, the film arrived during one of America's most turbulent years. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated months earlier. The Vietnam War was escalating. Cities burned with racial tensions. Into this chaos came a film where a black man was the hero, the smartest person in the room, giving orders to white characters. This wasn't just casting, it was revolution. Duane Jones, who played Ben, brought dignity and intelligence to a role that could have been anyone. Romero claimed he simply cast the best actor, that race wasn't a consideration, but Jones knew better. He modified dialogue, removing stereotypical elements, insisting Ben speak with intelligence and authority. He transformed what could have been exploitation into representation. The film's critique of American society was savage. The militia at the end, treating the crisis like a turkey shoot, reflected how authority responds to crisis with violence, without discrimination. The Cooper family's dysfunction showed the nuclear family crumbling under pressure. The young couple's death suggested that love and innocence had no place in this new world order. Consider the film's treatment of media. The television and radio broadcasts provided information, but also false hope. They promised rescue stations that might not exist, solutions that didn't work. The media became another character, shaping decisions that led to death. How prescient this seems now, in our age of information overload and fake news. The ending remains one of cinema's greatest gut punches. Ben survives everything. The undead, human treachery, isolation, only to be killed by the very forces meant to restore order. The film suggests that the real threat isn't external monsters, but internal prejudices. The undead were just catalysts, revealing humanity's true nature. Romero created more than horror. He created social commentary, disguised as entertainment. Each subsequent Dead film would expand this vision, but none matched the raw power of the original. This wasn't just about survival med. It was about what survival costs, what we sacrifice to stay alive, and whether that survival is worth it if we lose our humanity in the process. The film's legacy extends beyond cinema. It influenced how we think about societal collapse, about group dynamics under pressure, about the thin line between civilization and chaos. Video games, novels, television shows, all draw from the template Romero created in that Pennsylvania farmhouse. What makes this film eternal is its refusal to provide easy answers. There's no explanation for the undead's rise. Radiation from Venus is suggested but never confirmed. There's no clear villain. Even Harry, despicable as he is, just wants to protect his family. There's no redemption, no lesson learned, no hope that humanity will do better next time. Instead, we're left with smoke rising from a pyre, carrying away both monsters and heroes, without distinction. The film asks, in the end, does it matter who was right? Does it matter who survived? Or are we all just future smoke, waiting for our turn on the fire? This pessimism, wrapped in the metaphor of the undead, speaks to something fundamental in the human experience. We fear death, yes, but we fear even more becoming something inhuman while still walking around. The undead are us without souls, without consciousness, without choice, animated meat pursuing base desires. How different are they from the living, who shoot without thinking, who barricade themselves, without helping others, who see enemies where they should see fellow humans?